This is Green Street, the environmental health show, greenstreetnews.org, Patti and Doug Wood, and our worldwide network of experts here every week to make sure you know how to protect yourself and your family in this increasingly toxic world, because the government isn't going to do it for you. Welcome back. We often talk here on the show about the failure of medical schools to adequately train their students on environmental health issues. As a result, most medical doctors don't really have a good sense of how environmental factors can impact a patient's health. Today on Green Street, you'll meet an exceptional pediatrician who gets the whole picture and who has some excellent advice for parents of young children. So stay tuned for that. But first, some of the headlines of the week. Patti, what do you got for us this week?
This is really interesting. States are requesting nationwide monitoring of microplastics in drinking water. First time we've heard about this.
Who's going to do that?
Well, a coalition of 7 states has sent a petition to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency requesting nationwide monitoring of drinking water supplies for microplastics with the goal of better understanding the occurrence of contamination in drinking water supplies. Joining then-Governor Murphy of New Jersey in signing the petition were Delaware Governor Matt Meyer, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, Maryland Governor Wes Moore, Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont. Microplastics pose special concerns due to their suspected overall prevalence and their ability to accumulate and persist in the environment and in the human body. Primary sources of microplastics are microbeads in cosmetics and plastic pellets, which are also called nurdles, used for making plastic products. Microplastics also enter the environment as the result of the wear and fragmentation of larger plastic items such as textiles and tires during use or from environmental exposure. Other sources include paints, plastic-coated fertilizers, really important, and mulch films used in agriculture, plastic film from food packaging, rubber from shoes, nylon thread from fishing nets, and clothes made from synthetic fibers, polystyrene from food containers and packaging materials, and polypropylene from plastic bottles and food wrappers.
You know, it's so hard to avoid plastic in your life, but one thing you could do is to stop wearing plastic clothes.
Yes.
You know, I mean,
Stop wearing polyester clothing.
That would be big if consumers stopped wearing plastic clothes.
Plastic fibers or synthetics like acrylic and nylon and polyester and so on are very commonly used for fast fashion.
Sure.
And fast fashion is just where
cheap,
it's at. It's
right?
cheap. You can wear something 2 or 3 times and
throw it away.
Throw it out.
Yeah. All right. Well, I got an article by Adam Mahoney writing in Capital B News. The headline is Black Residents Win Key Ruling in Cancer Alley Environmental Racism Case. In a pocket of Louisiana known as Cancer Alley, 7 times as many people are expected to be diagnosed with cancer than the national average in these disproportionately black communities. Now a federal district court has given those residents something they almost never get, a chance to put the whole system on trial. On February 9th, a judge in New Orleans ruled that groups representing residents of Louisiana's Cancer Alley, which stretches from New Orleans to Baton Rouge, can proceed with their landmark lawsuit seeking a pause on toxic industrial plants in 2 majority black districts in St. James Parish. The case will force a jury to decide whether the disproportionate placing of facilities whose pollution is tied to cancer cases, asthma, heart and lung diseases, and neurological issues is a vestige of slavery. Since construction of the first industrial plant in the area in 1958, at least 28 out of the 32 plants have been placed in the majority black districts. No facility has been allowed to locate in majority white parts of the parish in nearly 50 years. So it's going to be interesting to see. This is a really gigantic legal case now that's going on. The Center for Constitutional Rights is representing the black families. I've got some really smart lawyers. So what happens next will hinge in part on who ends up in the jury box. It's going to be very interesting to watch.
Wow.
We'll keep an eye on it. All right. You got something else?
Yeah, this is from The Hill. The release of a new food pyramid has been met with mixed reactions by school food advocates who say schools will need more money to comply. The new guidelines, taking the form of an upside-down pyramid, shows vegetables, fruits, proteins, dairy, and healthy fats at the top and whole grains at the bottom.
That makes no sense to me, but whatever. Okay,
HHS Secretary Robert Kennedy, who has long railed against how much ultra-processed food Americans consume, said, quote, "Whole, nutrient-dense food is the most effective path to better health and lower health care costs," end quote. I agree.
I agree too. Sure.
Right. Many schools are working with outdated kitchen equipment. Some have actually gotten rid of their cooking equipment.
Yeah.
And they're understaffed because they're not able to offer competitive wages. While school cafeterias try to offer items from scratch, many rely on some prepackaged foods for part of their meals.
I remember when we were in school, when they'd be cooking, lunch, the whole
started
school would
around
smell good.
9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning.
That's right. You could smell it, and everybody would get hungry and couldn't wait to go to lunch.
That's right.
They don't do that anymore.
Nope.
They just heat up prepackaged foods.
That's correct.
Made in some
fact,
factory somewhere.
In many districts, as it said in this article, there are no stoves. There's no stove. There's no ovens.
So they can't cook anything.
Everything is
even
prepackaged.
if they wanted to.
Anyway,
All right.
we'll see.
We'll see.
I mean, it sounds good on paper.
Yeah.
We'll see, but the real story is.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Patti.
You're welcome. Modern medicine is full of miracles. We can mend hearts, replace livers, repair our eyes, fix all kinds of knee, shoulder, and hip problems, and provide more years of comfortable living than was ever possible before. But at the same time, modern medicine is also failing us. Today, despite the fact that we pay the highest prices for medical care of any country, our citizens are sicker, fatter, and have more mental problems than anywhere else in the world. Why is that?
To help answer that question, we turn to Dr. Michelle Perro. Dr. Perro is a veteran pediatrician with over 4 decades of experience in acute and integrative medicine. She is co-author of the highly acclaimed book, What's Making Our Children Sick, and is executive director of the nonprofit science-based website GMO Science. Her second book, Making Our Children Well, is about to be released. Patti and I had the pleasure of speaking with Michelle Perro the other day, and we began our conversation talking about what worries her the most. Here's our conversation with Dr. Michelle Perro.
What I worry about most is overwhelming young families with what they have to manage and mixed messaging from the technocracy and the crunchy whole foods organic regen movement. And I don't think they have to be mismatched, but I believe the messaging is so difficult for young families and young parents that I worry about too much. I can't do any of it. I worry about an overwhelm. They're hearing it about the environment, the food, the water, the political landscape, EMFs, 5G. It's coming at them fast and furious. So I have another book coming out, but I wanted to address that, is talking to parents directly and empowering them that they have the capacity to take over their family's health without intervention from pharma, without having access to, I'm an integrative pediatrician. There aren't that many of us who understand holistic health. And to extract, ancient wisdom, like, chicken soup for the soul kind of wisdom. So that is what I'm hoping to do, that based on that worry.
So you have a new book coming out. What's it about? How is it different from the book you've written before?
Well, the first one was in response to so many children that I was seeing in the clinic, I couldn't keep up. Chronic disease was mounting. I was seeing an explosion of autistic spectrum disorder, gut disorders, asthma, allergies, eczema, ADHD, sleep issues, obesity, metabolic disruptions. And when I wrote the book to get to more hands, I could see maybe 10 chronically ill kids in a day in the clinic. That's all you can handle. The visits were an hour, but I needed to reach more. That was the impetus. So that came out in 2017, What's Making Our Children Sick. And that looked at industrial food, GMOs and pesticides, and the effects on our kids' health based on kids from my clinic. Those were real stories, real patients. And my co-author at the time, and she'll admit to this, Dr. Adams, didn't believe any of it when we started.
Really?
By the time she sat with me in the clinic, 180. Come to book number 2, Making Our Children Well. I recognized that the first one was heady. There were not enough solutions. I needed to create a pragmatic, solutionary, parent-focused brain download that people can use, that's simplistic. Most Americans do not have a science background. There's nothing easy about genetic engineering, by the way, or GMOs. It's not a simple concept. And then offering a how-to based on nutrition and homeopathy, 2 of my passions, and with practical advice. That's book 2. It'll be out in a month.
Fantastic.
I'm looking forward to reading it, and
Yeah.
I've got young parents in our family. But food is a huge issue, and I know that you're talking about GMOs and so on. And so, how much of what you're seeing is a direct result of the food that children are eating, being exposed to today?
Patty, I like numbers, and this is right off the top of my head. I'd say 80%. Our food
Wow.
is
Wow.
our food
Wow.
is poisoning our children. It's toxic. Our food is toxic. And I want to be clear. I so appreciate the government looking at ultra processed foods. And here in the great state of California, even Governor Newsom banned ultra processed foods from school lunches. Huge, huge first
That's
step.
huge, right?
Bravo. So ultra processed food is bad, but what are the ingredients of the ultra processed foods? They are coming from the chemical, big ag, industrial food-like products, right? Instead of organic regenerative, we've done monocropping. We don't need to go into all that. So we have extraordinary levels of pesticides in our foods. Pesticides are making our kids sick. There's so much data and GMOs. GMOs are not benign. The GMOs, also known as genetic engineering, genetic modification, synbio, bioengineered, when people don't like a certain language, either Silicon Valley or Big Ag or whomever does a little bit linguistic gymnastics and changes the terminology, right?
Right.
So they've played and tweaked with more favorable language, green coded language, same stuff. And right now, the big push, and this is the other alarming thing, is synthetic foods, cellular foods, phony plant-based foods, which people are rejecting, by the way. But there are companies that want to interject these synthetic foods and even get them on insurance plans made in a lab, not on a farm, not from a dairy, from the lab, which they call precision medicine. They're using these engaging, millennial-friendly terminology to engage our youth, young parents, their focus to make it acceptable. Convenience, precision base, nutrigenomic, based on your own genetics. You can get a functional food from a lab based on your individuality, right? It appeals to a young person who's on their devices 24/7. And I say, stop. This is not better eating through technology. We're not better living through chemistry and technology. That the ways we did things are often better. Because something is older does not mean it's outdated. And this is not anti-science. Let's dump all that anti-terminology right out the window as well. This is pro-health. So when people claim that I am anti-science, I'm like, no, actually, I read a lot of science. I'm pro-children, I'm pro-family, I'm pro-health, with the least chemical inputs to maximize nutrition from soil. Soil and gut health are synonymous. Healthy soil.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, we have a farmer in the family who's a organic biodynamic farmer, and they looked and looked and looked for years to find exactly the right farm. And of course, what did they do first was just test soil, every inch of that 120 acres. And it's what they call river loam, the type of soil, and it just is unbelievable growing medium. I mean, it's just like beautiful soil for growing beautiful food.
I love this idea of young people returning back to be farmers. And there is a movement afoot of people getting back to the land, homesteading, this type of concept. And it can be done in a way that, it's not sun up to sundown where farmers are just working and have no life. We can make this more palatable. And people are doing it with having more farm experiences, Airbnbs on their farm, educational classes, growing different types of crops, some that appeal to like high-end restaurants, what I forgot what kind of high-end foods or very fancy types of crops. I don't know what they call them because I'm not eating at Michelin star restaurants that often. I'm just saying, I actually don't eat out very often at all. I tend to cook a lot. So I think I love this idea, and this is what we have to teach. And I love the idea as well. And this is what I have in the book, how parents can grow, whether you've got an apartment, a windowsill, a backyard, a deck, whatever you got, you can grow. If you've got a windowsill, you can grow herbs because when you engage children with the growing process, their interest increases and they tend to experiment more. So we're creating relationship with soil. It's not just about eating organic. It's about children, families, understanding our relationship to organic soil. We've lost it. So this is another imperative.
So people have lost the art of cooking, though, Michelle. I mean, a lot of people don't cook. They order everything out. We heard a story the other day about how they now have robots that'll deliver your food from the restaurant. It's like it seems out of control to us.
It's so funny you should mention that, Doug, because my husband and I were just in LA and we saw these little bot-like things on the street, and I thought they were surveillance cameras. That's where my conspiratorial mind went to, like, we're being watched. And then we learned that they were delivery services from your DoorDash or whatever company that people are using. Boom, mind blown. I thought, I understand the need for convenience. But what I try to teach families is you don't have to be a short order cook. You don't have to be Alice Waters in the kitchen. You can repeat meals. You can learn to cook from YouTube. I was learning to ferment. I asked my kid, how do I ferment, make sauerkraut? This is some years ago. And Angie said, Mom, YouTube it. I said, fine, I will. I YouTubed it. Oh, it was really easy. I want every kid eating fermented foods. That's one of my own personal goals, is get those kids eating sauerkraut. So we have to get people back in the kitchen. But it's not just mom or just dad. It's everyone. Kids love getting the kitchen dirty. So a lot of moms, I was one, I didn't want a dirty kitchen. I know, looking back at that 30 years ago, my kids are all grown up. I would let that go right now. Dirty the kitchen. Come on in, everybody. So allowing kids to get messy, totally doable. We have to get families back in the kitchen. So many ways to learn to cook. And again, it can be simple. And I have a whole section of the book, how to create a pantry, how to create meal planning, how to set it up so it's not odorous, in simple language. This is not a dissertation. This is simple steps, how we do that. I used to cook one day a week when my kids were little and then just store it for the week. Make 3 meals on Sundays. That was my day off sometimes. And then have it all week long. And then have everything cut because there's a lot of chopping involved, things like that. So I'm not saying it's easy, but once you make it habit, as we all know, habit becomes routine and routine makes it easier. You just have to get in the habit.
Yep. But there's a lot of fear. Where do you start? Well, I start with soup. Now, soup is one of the easiest things in the world to make, and you can just make a pot of soup that will last, for 3 meals. And, almost all soups start with the same 3 ingredients: onions, carrots, and celery. And then you move on from there. You add a turnip and some tomatoes and some barley, and you've got vegetable barley soup. I mean, there's so many things that you can do with soup. And it's I think one of the most important things that you learn to make.
Well, if parents aren't teaching this and kids aren't learning it, then, how do you learn this stuff? It's a good question. When I see, kids, I'm like, you can navigate the computer. You can work 3 devices at a time. I see 3 screens on your desktop. So you have some skills. You definitely have some skills. So we just have to extract what you know there and just bring it into hands-on. Also, I tell young families all the time, whatever takeout you're using, I pick DoorDash, but whatever you're using, I said that food for the most part is not organic. Now, it may be green and it may be healthier choices, but if it's not organic, it has pesticides. Even if it says non-GMO, it has pesticides. The average food has 6 different pesticides. There's almost 0 data on synergistic effects between multiple pesticides. They don't want you to know that. And as a matter of fact, the main pesticide in almost everything, which is Roundup and glyphosate-based herbicides, most of the studies just used one ingredient of the pesticide, which is glyphosate. They didn't even test the whole formulation. And the whole formulation is way more toxic than just the glyphosate. There's something called POEA in there, which breaks down cell membranes. So not good. When you add toxicity from the water, fluoride, aluminum from the food and the soil, where it's in everything now, aluminum, and we can talk about where that's coming from. And glyphosate, I just wrote a Substack on this, and I'm doing a talk on it on my own podcast next week, is it creates a stable compound, which really messes up your kidneys and can cross into your brain through something called the blood-brain barrier. And it's glyphosate, aluminum, and fluoride. And so we know that 75% of the water in the U.S. is fluoridated. So most children are getting fluoridated water. So if parents are cooking with non-filtered water, and it's a special filter to take out fluoride, by the way. It's not just a simple carbon-based, over-the-counter, $25 filter. You need something more sophisticated than that, unfortunately. Parents don't know that. How would you know that? Unless you're on this show listening to us, you may not have heard that. So special water filter. Now we're getting complicated. You have to buy your organic, preferably regenerative food. You need a special filter on your water. You know, you don't want to do ultra processed foods. Everything has to be from scratch. It can be overwhelming. And this was
Yeah.
an overwhelm that when we first started this conversation that I'm concerned about. I
Yeah.
don't want to overwhelm families because then once you induce fear, then it's like, I can't do anything. Hands
Right.
up. Like, oh no, what do I do? No fear.
So
Yeah.
just think about what our grandparents and their parents had to deal with, and that was none of this.
Yeah.
They weren't dealing with they weren't dealing with GMO foods. They weren't dealing with, ultra processed foods. They weren't dealing with
Glyphosate.
pesticide laden everything. They were cooking whole food. That's it. And they ate the same foods.
And many of those families, my grandma had 10 kids.
Hmm.
So it wasn't even just 2 kids, they were cooking for 12. So
Wow.
unlimited budgets. And it wasn't a whole food go through. You had back in our day where I grew up, there was the butcher, the fruit and veggie store, then you had to go to the bread store. There were like stops all day long. And these gals shopped every day. But the
Yep.
ingredients were fresh. There were no genetically modified foods. Pesticide use has gone up exponentially because of GMOs. People should understand that. That was since 1996. So what we ate as kids and our grandparents is not the food our children are eating today. I want that to be clear, that this industrial food is not what we ate. So this is what they were dealing with, and they produce healthy meals, and they could have been simple meals. Some scrambled eggs, some veggies, you got a meal. Doesn't have to be complicated.
So you just mentioned that, can you talk a little bit about the statistics that are floating around saying that this generation will not live as long as their parents? And this is the first time that this has occurred, and what the relationship is between what they're eating and that alarming statistic.
Certainly. So when I wrote the first book, that was 2017. And at that juncture, 54% of American children had a chronic disease. I got that data from a study based in 2012. 2012. That's pre-COVID, not as deep into the pesticide usage as we are now, not as many genetically engineered foods as we have now. And very little data is coming out now on the percentage of American children with chronic diseases. I don't think they want to publish it.
They don't.
They don't. But we know for here in our great state of California, let me just rag on this state for a minute. Recent data in our state shows that 1 in 12.5 boys is now on the autism spectrum. Now, I don't want to talk about neurodiversity right now and all that kind of thing. Children on the spectrum have a huge degree of variability, but one common denominator is abnormal gut. Many of them have food intolerances, many of them have genetic issues, many of them have chronic infection, many of them have toxic metals. So it's not so benign. It's not so easy to raise those children. When I first was a resident at Bellevue, the rate of autism was 1 in 10,000 children. So in my career practice, which is 45 years now, we've seen this explosion of chronic neurodevelopmental, neurocognitive disorder in children. And may I go one step further and say it is clear that autism spectrum disorder, as well as other neurocognitive disorders in children, are autoimmune in nature, where it's an autoimmune process, not benign. This is my lifetime of children's care. Also, I'd be so bold anecdotally to say the rate of chronic disease in kids is probably now 75%. 1 in 3 to 1 in 5 children has obesity, depending on what state you live in, and or metabolic disruption based on eating from food swamps, food deserts. I would say regarding asthma and allergic diseases, they are called atopic diseases, allergies, asthma, and eczema kind of go together. It can be anywhere from 1 in 5 if they come from, let's say, Puerto Rico to 1 in 9. Detroit, I think, is the kids in inner city Detroit, it's like 1 in 5. So asthma, sleep disruptions, about 2/3 of children under the age of 10 have something called dysomnias, which are disruptions of sleep. On and on. Mental health disorders, and mental health is part of physical health. It shouldn't be its own category where disease is separated at the neck, like the head is cut off from the rest of the body. Oh, heck no. These two organs, head and gut and microbiome, are chatting constantly. I've read statistics as high as 50% of teens are struggling with some mental health challenges, depression and anxiety, OCD, learning challenges, ADHD. ADHD, when I wrote the book, was about 1 in 13 kids now. I think it's more like 1 in 8. And not to mention, certainly not related to children, but indirectly, infertility. Infertility is skyrocketing. When I wrote the book, it was 1 in 12 couples. I would go as far as to say now, I haven't looked at this data in a year or two. It might be 1 in 6 to 1 in 8 couples. So give me a little wiggle room on that number. However, many of those couples use IVF, in vitro fertilization, and those women need to take some serious pharmaceuticals prior to in vitro. All that stuff gets passed on to the fetus and then the baby. Those IVF babies are born with an increased rate of certain disorders, particularly autism. Many of those babies are premature. Premature babies have increased risk of autism and seizures and other neurologic issues. So you see, we're setting up a new wave of chronic diseases that hasn't even hit yet because of the IVF rates and the rates of infertility.
Wow.
That's what keeps me up at night.
We often call this show the good news show.
Okay, so Michelle, so I have to ask you, given what you've been through and what you've been discovering, are you optimistic at all? And if so, where does that optimism come from?
Yes, I am optimistic by nature. That is my nature. I like to say, as I use prior, solutionary, and that is a word that my dear friend Ruth gave me to use. I focus on what we do to make it better based in pragmatism and common sense. I know, common sense, not so common, and affordability without bankrupting families. That's not my goal. I don't want people to spend more on supplements than their food, for example. So how do we do this? So we give tools, simplified tools for every family to empower families to take back their health. Families do not need to be infantilized, patronized, or in a patriarchal medical system. They can take care of their own families. They have this ability, and we need to redeliver it back to them. We once had it. It just has to be resurrected. It's in our DNA to take care of ourselves. We have to teach it. However we do it, in different ways we can do it. There is change afoot. A lot of what Secretary Kennedy has done has been positive change, whether it's the food pyramid, the ultra-processed food issues, making autism awareness. We weren't even talking about autism before Secretary Kennedy, so hats off to that. I would say what I'm seeing come out from states. Florida, just last month, published data on infant formulas they study showing toxic metals. My organization, my nonprofit, did that study as well 2 years ago, and we showed toxic metals in 40 out of 40 infant formulas we tested. Lead and aluminum, off the charts. And we picked the common infant formulas that you would get at Walmart, Target, Costco, Amazon. Those are the formula brands we tested, and organic and foreign. And Florida did that study. So there are states saying we are poisoning children. So what I ask is, does America love her children? So if so, act like it. Act like you love your children, America. And let's work on support of American children, whether it's infant formula, school lunches, clean air, stopping pesticide spraying at schools, whatever we need to do, you have to decrease the toxic load. So I say, get off the couch. We're not activists, we're humans. This is not our issue, this is everybody's issue. And not everybody needs to get on a podium. What we can do is work at your school, work in your own community, your town council, wherever it is you need to go, get off the couch. And we can support each other. That's what I think.
Dr. Michelle Perro, parent, pediatrician, and author of the highly acclaimed book, What's Making Our Children Sick, and her new book, Making Our Children Well. You can learn more about Dr. Perro, including links to her website and her books, at greenstreetnews.org. That's going to do it for this edition of Green Street. Special thanks to Dr. Perro and all of you who listen to and support this show. Patti and I will be back next week with another edition of Green Street. Thanks for listening.